Hello everyone! Welcome to another episode of A Day with Mrs. Loresca. For today's virtual learning session in creative writing, I will discuss its first most essential learning competency, which is to use imagery, diction, figures of speech, and specific experiences to evoke meaningful responses from the readers in detail. This is Mrs. Loresca and I am your teacher for today. In our previous video, we cited the definitions of creative writing, its difference from technical writing, and its four forms. What again are its four forms? Yes, you are correct. We have poetry, fiction, drama, and creative nonfiction, which will be discussed thoroughly next semester. For today, we will have variations of language. Since the tools for creative writing are words, you must be able to manipulate and utilize words and phrases effectively and efficiently so that they are, at the very least, as colorful and vivid and lively as a painter's paint. So I suggest, my dear students, that you choose words that are vivid and be able to play with them when you string them all together. Therefore, not only you must write sentences and phrases that convey information, you must make them engaging and enjoyable. Now, how will we make it happen? We should utilize the following literary devices: imagery, figures of speech, idiomatic expressions, and diction. Let's start with imagery. Imagery creates mental pictures in the reader as he reads the text. That's why it appeals to the senses. Here are the forms of imagery: visual imagery, auditory imagery, olfactory imagery, gustatory imagery, and tactile imagery. Here are the different examples of the 5 forms of imagery. Visual imagery, which refers to our sense of sight. The night was black as ever, but bright stars lit up the sky in beautiful and varied constellations which were sprinkled across the astronomical landscape. Auditory imagery, which refers to our sense of hearing. Silence was broken by the peal of piano keys as Shannon began practicing her concerto. Olfactory imagery, which refers to our sense of smell. She smelled the scent of sweet hibiscus wafting through the air, its tropical smell a reminder that she was on vacation in a beautiful place. Gustatory imagery, which refers to our sense of taste. The candy melted in her mouth, and swirls of bittersweet chocolate and slightly sweet but salty caramel blended together on her tongue. And finally, tactile imagery. After the long run, he collapsed in the grass with tired and burning muscles. The grass tickled his skin and sweat cooled on his brow. The second device that we can use is figures of speech. Figures of speech are literary devices that achieve a special effect by using words in distinctive ways. They provoke a thought process and bring depth to the language. It can be dichotomized into 2 categories. The first are devices used to create sound or melody. The second are devices that are used to evoke imagination and emotions. These are the figures of speech used to create sound: alliteration, assonance, consonants, onomatopoeia, anaphora, epiphora, and anadiplosis. Let's start with alliteration. This refers to the repetition of an initial consonant sound. Here is an example. Don't delay dawn's disarming display. Dusk demands daylight. Check on the underlined letters in the sentence. They all repeat the initial consonant sound, which is D. Next is assonance. This refers to the identity or similarity in sound between internal vowels in neighboring words. Here is an example. It beats as it sweeps, as it cleans. Again, check on the underlined letters and the sound they produce, which is E. Let's now have consonants. Like alliteration, this is a repetition of consonant sound but in the final position. Let's read the example. Once you go black, you can never go back. The repeated consonant sound is K. We'll now have onomatopoeia. This is the use of words that imitate the sounds associated with the objects they refer to. Example: the clock's tick-tocks remind the old man of his impending death. Let's move on to the next one. Anaphora. Same word or phrase is repeated at the beginning of successive clauses or verses. Example: I'm not afraid to die. I'm not afraid to live. I'm not afraid to fail. I'm not afraid to succeed. I am not afraid to fall in love. I am not afraid to be alone. I'm just afraid I might have to stop talking about myself for 5 minutes. Check on the underlined phrases. They are repeated at the beginning of each sentence. Let's move on to the next one. Epiphora. What is repeated is a word or phrase at the end of succession of clauses or verses. Example: Phi, phi, thou shamest thy shape, thy love thy wit, which should bedeck thy shape, thy love thy wit. Unlike anaphora, these phrases are repeated at the end of the line. And for the last one is anadiplosis. This is different in that the last word of a verse or sentences is repeated at the beginning of the next one. Here is an example. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. See how the last words became the first words in the succeeding sentences? Good. So these are the figures of speech that are used to create sound. Here are the figures of speech that evoke imagination and emotions. Simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole, understatement, metonymy, synecdoche, euphemism, rhetorical question, climax, anticlimax, oxymoron, sarcasm, irony, paradox, parallelism, apostrophe, and prosopopoeia. Let's start with the commonly used figures of speech. Simile. This is a stated comparison, usually using like or as between two fundamentally dissimilar things that have certain qualities in common. Example: and it seems to me that you lived your life like a candle in the wind, never knowing who to cling to when the rain set in, by Elton John. Next is metaphor. This is an implied comparison between two unlike things that actually have something in common. Example: 'Cause baby, you're a firework. Come on, show them what you're worth, by Katy Perry. Next one is personification. This is a figure of speech in which an inanimate object or abstraction is endowed with human qualities or abilities. Example: the picture in that magazine screamed for attention. The fourth one is hyperbole. This is an extravagant statement or the use of exaggerated terms for the purpose of emphasis or heightened effect. Example: under the lights tonight, you turned around and you stole my heart. With just one look, when I saw your face, I fell in love by One Direction. Let's now move on to the next set of figures of speech. Understatement. This figure of speech deliberately makes a situation seem less important or serious than it is. Example: it's nothing, it's just a scratch, when referring to a dent in a car. Next one, metonymy. This is a figure of speech in which one word or phrase is substituted for another with which it is closely associated. Example: Hollywood is undeterred by the mass actions against stereotyping organized by the minorities. Hollywood referring to the movie industry. Next one, synecdoche. This is a figure of speech in which a part is used to represent the whole or the whole for a part. Example: let's take my new wheels out for a spin. Wheels referring to your car. Next we have euphemism. This refers to the substitution of an inoffensive term for one considered offensively explicit. Example: most of the informal settlers have been relocated outside Metro Manila. Informal settlers refer to those people who live in the squatters area. Next we have rhetorical question. This is a question that needs no answer. Its purpose: to impress to the listener or reader unintended message. Example: marriage is a wonderful institution, but who would want to live in an institution? Next, climax. This is a figure of speech in which a series of phrases or sentences is arranged in ascending order of rhetorical forcefulness. Example: let a man acknowledge his obligation to himself, his family, his country, and his God. The next one is anticlimax. This is the opposite of climax. Look at this example. He has seen the ravages of war. He has known natural catastrophes. He has been to Singles Bar. We shall now have oxymoron. This figure of speech uses incongruous or contradictory terms, usually side by side with each other. Example: she cannot be trusted. She is a real phony friend. Look at the underlined phrase. Aren't they contradicting? Next, sarcasm. This makes use of words that mean the opposite of what the speaker or writer wants to say, especially in order to insult someone, to show irritation, or to be funny. Example: nice perfume. Must you marinate in it? Next we have irony. This refers to a statement or situation that is contradicted by the appearance or presentation of the idea. Look at this example. It says, who would expect that Bill Gates would win a computer in his company's raffle draw? Then we have paradox. This refers to a statement that appears to contradict itself. Example: I must be cruel to be kind. Parallelism. This refers to repeated syntactical similarities introduced for rhetorical effect. When you are right, you cannot be too radical. When you are wrong, you cannot be too conservative. Then we have Apostrophe. This figure of speech addresses an inanimate object, an abstraction, or an absent person. Example: Moon River. Wherever you're going, I'm going your way. Next, prosopopoeia. An imaginary character or an absent person is represented as speaking. Example: as wisdom speaking. From the mouth of the Most High I came forth, and mist-like covered the earth. Another literary device that can help you make writing a more challenging experience is idiomatic expression. Idiomatic expressions or idioms are words, phrases, or sentences that have meanings different from the literal meanings of the words in the expressions. For more examples, check on Google. And finally, we have diction. Diction is defined as style of speaking or writing determined by the choice of words by a speaker or a writer. Good writing makes good use of diction. A writer's choice of words and his selection of graphic words not only affect the reader's attitude, but also convey the writer's feelings toward the literary work. Creative writing has a more inventive, imaginative, and picturesque diction. But just as there are differences among the journalistic genre, there are also variations in literary or creative writing genres. So that ends our session for today. Again, this is Mrs. Miresca. Until our next